Cheap little amps have been getting better and better in the last 5 years. It is amazing what we can get for $100, for $150, sometimes even $75. But there's always been one thing that has bugged me about them. Well, today, that problem is solved. This is the Fosi Audio P4. It's a preamp. And guess what? For the first time, we have multiple analog inputs. I know, crazy, right? So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about the brand new Fosi Audio P4 preamp for $99.99. By the way, there's a 25% off coupon that you can take advantage of today.
Back in that bag again. Whoa, yeah. Hey. Back in that, yeah. Tell them to watch it. Now I ain't talking my pockets, just know we ain't running out the way that we
P4 from Fosi Audio should be available right now, which means you can buy it right now. The P4 is simply a preamp. There's no amplification inside this little device. One of my biggest gripes about all of these little amplifiers is you don't have multiple analog inputs. You have great power, you have great sound, you have great versatility because you can add different power supplies, make it even beefier. You can change out op amps, but the one thing that you can't do is add multiple analog inputs. Sometimes one will have balanced inputs and single-ended inputs, and I could never figure out why it was such a big deal to put 2, maybe 3 single-ended analog inputs on the back of one of these amplifiers. Well, the wait is over, because here it is. This is the Fosi Audio P4. It's a preamp, and it has bass and treble tone controls. It also has 3 different levels of gain on the back, and then 3 analog inputs, 1, 2, 3, 1 single-ended analog output, and then another little tiny 3.5 millimeter preamp output for something like a subwoofer. So this can not only go into a regular power amp, but you can also run another cable out to a powered subwoofer. Now, if this was just a switcher box, I wouldn't be all that impressed, but it's not just a switcher box. Because it comes with a remote control. And the volume pot on here is actually motorized. What a motorized pot means is when you turn up the volume knob actually turns around. And some people think that a motorized pot is better than just a digital pot, myself included. Also, bass and treble controls right on the front. Now, you can't control those with remote control, so you got to get up and move these around. There is a detent at the 12 o'clock position, so you know where you're starting from. And there's one single button over here and 3 LEDs. One for analog input 1, one for analog input 2, and then one for, you guessed it, analog input 3. To turn this on and off, you just long press it and then it'll turn on and off. The size of the P4 matches up perfectly to the Fosi Audio V3. The V3, I think, was the first Fosi Audio product that I think had a GoFundMe or something like that. Basically, you backed the project before the production was ready. And I think they did pretty well with that. And if you look at the cases, they're a little bit different. The V3 is just a tiny bit smaller in width and in height. And the V3 monos, what I had this hooked up to, is also just a teensy bit smaller. And I had the P4 hooked up to the Fosi Audio V3 monos, which don't have a volume control. But you can still use this product to hook up to a variety of amps like the AIYIMA 807 Max, Like any of the Fozzy Audio stuff, anything that has a volume control, you can still hook this up to, but you're just gonna have to control volume on the P4 instead of the unit itself. It's interesting, I'm on their website and they say, another masterpiece driven by voice of customers. I would pay $150 for a pre that had 2 to 3 RCA inputs, a real sub out with volume, bass, and treble. Check. I agree with you, North of 40 from Audio Science Review. Now for this preamp, I'd be more impressed if it didn't have tubes. Check. And maybe more inputs. Jim from ASR. I completely agree because there is a P3, which is also from Fozzy Audio, but it has tubes on it and it really only has an analog input. So what's the point? It's not really a preamp. I've always wanted multiple analog inputs. Another one, solid state preamp that would allow for multiple inputs with a remote. Joe Smith from ASR. I agree with Joe Smith. If you want to make a real preamplifier, it should have at least 2 to 3 inputs. Thank you, Zach from ASR. I agree. It would be perfect if it had bypass and a remote and actually worked properly. Tony JZX from ASR. 100% agree with all of that, and I've been wanting that for quite a while. The cool thing about this remote control too is that it can control not only the P4, but also the ZD3, which is a DAC, which I actually had hooked into this too. The ZP3, I don't know what that is. The P4, which is this, and then the BT20A Max. I see a BT20A Pro, but I don't see a BT20A Max. So maybe that's gonna be a new product. The P4 also has a replaceable op amp. I agree that the P4 is near perfect. However, there is one thing that it is missing. That's a trigger output. That way you can turn on your amps remotely when the P4 turns on. But beggars can't be choosers. I am getting almost all of the things that I've wanted from this little device. And I know it may not seem like a big deal to a lot of people, but we have to wrap our heads around this. This is a fully functioning preamp for $99. It's got a remote control. It's got 3 analog inputs. It's got bass and treble tone controls, and fundamentally a subwoofer output for $99. That's bonkers. The bypass switch on the back is actually for tone controls. I had the ZD3, which is a DAC, going into the P4. I also had the iFi Zen Phono, I think whatever the latest Zen Phono is, 2nd, 3rd generation. And then I also had the SMSL PL100, which is a little mini CD player, going into the P4. From a sound standpoint, I didn't really feel like it colored the sound at all, unless you're using the tone controls. Then it adds a little bass and a little bit of treble. Treble I felt like was, I wish it was a little bit higher, because I think the treble was probably, I don't know, around 6K maybe. But again, beggars can't be choosers. It does what it's supposed to do. It makes the treble sound trebly-er, makes the bass sound bassier. Prior to the P4, the most affordable preamp that I would recommend would be the Schiit Saga, which is obviously quite a bit bigger than the P4, and it's very reasonably priced too, at I think under $300. One gets 2 more analog inputs. You don't get tone controls with the Saga though, and then you have 2 single-ended RCA outputs. There's also some different gain settings on the Saga, but still an incredible deal. But if you don't have $300 and you only have $100, then I am glad the P4 exists. Run by 12 volts here on the back, so you can add a linear power supply, and I do have a 12 volt linear power supply. Comes with a little wall wart, which is fine. It works. It operates it, makes it turn on and stuff. But again, the cool thing about a lot of these products is their upgrade path. So you can swap the op amp, which would probably be my first mod that I would do, or the first change I would do. and then I would add a linear power supply. That would be my second improvement. I literally have nothing bad to say about the P4, with the exception of I wish it had a trigger output, because then when you turned on your P4, it would turn on your amps. The V3 monos though do have signal sensing, so it kind of turns on anyway, and frankly most of the time I just leave my amplifiers on all the time anyway, but it would be cool if it did have a trigger output. It's built quite well too. Very nice knobs. Again, nothing bad to say. I've been wanting something like this for 4 years. 4.5 years I've been asking for something like this. And here it is. You can have a tiny, tiny, tiny little system, either for a soundbar replacement, for your desktop, heck, for the how funny would it be to have this huge rack and then just have a bunch of little components like this in the middle of a huge rack. I do wish that the ZA3, the ZD3, I wish they would put, I know I'm asking a lot, okay? I wish they would put this inside the ZD3 form factor. I think that would be really cool. Maybe that's what's coming. But I am really impressed with Fosi Audio. The P4, exactly what we needed. Invariably, there's gonna be a comment below that calls me a shill, that I'm just shilling for Fosi Audio. Well, I would say to you, dear viewer that wants to say I'm a shill, give me another example of a product that has 3 different analog inputs, has tone controls which are defeatable, has a remote control for 99 bucks. If you can tell me, if you can give me another product that does everything that this product does at $99 or even $150, then you can call me a shill. But until then, P4. Not too terrible. If you want to know what it sounds like, I mean, it's clean. It sounds almost identical to the Saga. With the V3 monos, I felt like it was a little bit of a mid-range focused system. Personally, I kind of prefer the ZA3 sound over the V3 monos, but I do think the V3 monos are a little bit more dynamic than the V3, the regular 2-channel system, but I didn't really feel like the P4 colored the sound one way or the other. Clean and clear. I don't know how many of these will be in stock, but I have 25% off coupons that will be in the description for Amazon, and I think directly to Fosi's website. So if you want or need a preamp, get one for 75 bucks with a remote control, with a motorized pot. Come on, that's ridiculous. And a perfect match to the P4 would be the Fosi Audio V3 monos. I will link that video right here. So don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu. Binge listen, maybe through your new Fosi Audio P4, and fill your soul with happiness. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man. Thank you so much for watching.